So let's get right into it. We're going to be decoding some of those habits that, well, they might get you labeled as a little weird. But what if psychology tells us those behaviors aren't flaws at all? What if they're actually the fingerprints of a really advanced brain at work?
I mean, seriously, who hasn't been called weird at some point, right? Maybe it's because you talk to yourself, or you need a ton of alone time, or maybe your desk looks like a creative hurricane just passed through. Well, what if I told you those quirks aren't just okay, they're actually scientifically linked to high intelligence?
Okay, so this is the whole point of our chat today. We're reframing things. On the left, you've got the stereotypes we all know. These habits are seen as flaws, signs of being lazy, or even antisocial. But on the right, that's where the science takes us. It shows these are actually features of a highly efficient and strategic mind. Let's break down exactly how that works.
First up, let's talk about talking to yourself. I know, it sounds a little out there, but it's far from being a sign of instability. Research shows it's a super sophisticated cognitive tool. It's kind of like your brain is running its own advanced internal seminar to figure things out.
And if you do this, you're in some pretty amazing company. Albert Einstein, one of the greatest minds in history, was famous for this exact habit. He would softly repeat sentences to himself, not because he was forgetful, but because he was deeply engaged in organizing his incredibly complex thoughts.
This habit even has a fancy official term: linguistic externalization. And it is not random muttering. Psychology shows it's an advanced strategy our brains use to manage what's called cognitive overload. When a problem gets too complicated to process silently inside your head, speaking it out loud actually helps give it structure. And here's a look at what's actually going on inside your brain. Self-talk is a pretty big deal neurologically. It fires up Broca's area, which handles speech production, and Wernicke's area, which is all about comprehension. This creates what scientists call a time wedge, a tiny little gap between thinking a thought and saying it. That gap gives you a crucial moment for reflection. It's almost like having an internal I versus me debate to check your own logic in real time.
But get this, it gets even more interesting. Research shows there are two different modes. Positive self-talk, what we're calling self-respect here, engages your brain's executive network, which is great for things like memory. But here's the wild part. Negative self-talk, or self-criticism, can also boost performance. It seems to dial down activity in the brain's reward center. This basically removes the distraction of wanting praise and puts you into a state of pure, heightened attention, motivated only by avoiding mistakes. It's a paradox, but it works.
All right, let's shift gears to our next weird habit, the preference for being alone. Now, this is not about being antisocial or some kind of social failure. For a high-functioning mind, solitude is often a deliberate, strategic, and necessary choice to be at your best.
Just take a look at this chart. It's based on a big study in the British Journal of Psychology, and it shows something called the Solitude Paradox. For most people, you see that first bar, it's a positive correlation. More social time equals more happiness. Simple enough. But now look at the bar for people with a high IQ. The link is completely flipped. More frequent socializing is actually linked with lower life satisfaction.
Let that just sink in for a second. For the brightest minds, more parties can literally mean less happiness. The standard advice we always hear to just go out and be with people can actually be the worst thing for the well-being of a highly intelligent person. Their happiness is just, well, it's wired differently. So why does this paradox exist? Well, psychology points to 4 key strategic reasons. First, solitude protects your brain from what's called attention residue. You know that feeling when you leave a conversation but part of your brain is still stuck in it? That. It also conserves your finite mental energy, helps regulate intense emotions by lowering stimulation, and, maybe most importantly, gives you the space to build a strong sense of who you are, away from social pressures. And this distinction is maybe the most crucial one of all. Loneliness is a painful, unwanted feeling of being disconnected. But the solitude that smart people often seek, that's a deliberate, restorative, and glorious choice. It's a source of strength, not a sign of weakness.
Okay, let's tackle 2 habits that often go hand in hand: having a messy desk and having a wandering mind. It turns out this creative chaos, both on the outside and on the inside, is directly linked to innovation.
I know it might drive some people absolutely crazy, but a study from the University of Minnesota actually found that a messy environment isn't just a mess. It's like a petri dish for new ideas. It's not a sign of a disorganized mind, but it's often a physical sign of a brain that is incredibly busy with much bigger things.
So here's the psychology behind that. Look on the left. Clean, orderly environments, they subconsciously encourage us to think conventionally, to play it safe. But messy environments, on the right, they signal a break from tradition. They actually encourage what's called divergent thinking, the ability to generate new, fresh ideas and explore unconventional solutions.
Okay, so that's your physical space. But what happens when your internal environment, your own mind, feels a bit messy? You know, when it wanders and drifts off? What we all call daydreaming.
This is where something called the default mode network, or DMN, comes into play. Just think of it as your brain's internal workshop. It fires up when you aren't focused on a specific task, and it's the neurological home of mind wandering, allowing your brain to connect distant ideas and run simulations of future possibilities. It's pretty incredible.
And this brings us to this really cool theory called the efficiency capacity model. It completely flips the script on daydreaming. It suggests that a wandering mind isn't a sign of a lack of focus, but a sign of a highly efficient brain. Basically, your brain is so good at processing routine stuff that it finishes early, and it has all this leftover mental energy, which it then smartly sends over to the DMN for deeper, more creative thinking.
So let's tie all of this together. The self-talk, the solitude, the creative chaos, these aren't just isolated quirks. They are all part of a larger, interconnected system. They're signs of a neurodiverse brain, one that is fundamentally wired to handle complexity. So if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. These habits are not just things to be tolerated. They are the unmistakable fingerprints of a brain that's optimized for depth, for clarity, and for innovation. You can think of them as the echoes of a powerful engine hard at work under the hood. What this all boils down to is an advanced cognitive feature set. At its core, this kind of brain has deep functional connectivity, letting its creative side and its logical side work together seamlessly. It has neurochemical flexibility, managing its internal chemistry for intense focus. And it has high-capacity processing, the very thing that frees up all that extra energy for deeper thought.
The philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer really captured this beautifully. In a world that's always pushing us to conform, these so-called weird habits are often about creating the mental and physical space you need to be authentically yourself and do your most important work.
So I'll just leave you with this question. After seeing the science behind it, which of your weird habits are you going to stop second-guessing and start celebrating as the incredible feature of an advanced mind that it truly is?